socialism, and all those topics. I'm not going to go into those. I feel like we talked about that a lot. But I had a lot of notes that I took down that I wanted to go over as important factors because we're going to go to the panel next after this. And basically, I want to highlight important points as far as political theory and tactics and like what we need to do as far as organizing. Like we can get in these groups, talk about like, oh, I'm communist, I do all this stuff. And like, it's good to have a community space, but we have to actually like have a foundation for all those things. Like how Ogadima talked about all these regions, their history, what they were struggling for. Like that's all important. But then you have texts like this, the Revolutionary Handbook. There's the library over there. There's a book called Organize, Fight, Win, all about Black communist women and how they've been so important to the struggle and how like most of the reason we don't know about them is they're locked up in academia. Like the entire structure in which we live is fighting a constant war against us. And so one of my first points I put in the notes is what Pan-Africanism is and isn't. Ogadima went over the vast majority of that, but understanding first and foremost that our national liberation struggle is in tandem and in line with all the other national liberation struggles, which is why when it comes to Red Nation, when it comes to the international struggles, the global prosperity, all these different groups, like if we're fighting for our liberation, we're not just going to do it solely by ourselves. It's something we have to unite with all peoples in. And that's such a key and important factor. And knowing that, and I wrote here, setting ourselves in our conditions and then finding solidarity with the colonial masses. That's a very core thing we have to keep in mind. And we aren't free until Africa is free. We're not free until Central America, South America, until Turtle Island is free. Like there is a real need to understand how interconnected all of our struggles are, which is why we have to understand not only ourselves, but like where we're actually going. But then I had a section that was Africans who are Africans. Someone mentioned, I don't remember who, a point about diasporic wars, like Africans here, Africans there, who's the real Black people kind of thing. Like none of that serves us in any type of serious way. We all need to unite. We all on average, the vast majority of African people, regardless of the diaspora, can find themselves at the bottom of a lot of real struggles because, again, the Western forces, they're united in the way that they think of Africa. They're united in the way they think of all these different nations, all these colonial nations. And so it's really central to understand that it doesn't matter what part of the globe we're on, as African peoples, like we have a common interest. And it's very obvious, but again, we can have minor differences and sometimes those little differences can be enough. And again, are exacerbated by our enemies. And then the final point, because I want to get over this really quickly, get into the panel. The final thing is scientific socialism versus national socialism. Because I feel like that's a thing, especially if you live in the U.S. empire, that a lot of people get confused about. We have ideas about if you vote for this person, if you're doing your small little group thing, like the inability to understand colonialism in the context of the settler colony, the U.S. empire, the Canadian empire, which we just learned owns pretty much all the world mining, apparently. Like, if we don't center the understanding that we have based on that scientific socialism, that analyzed history of what were our theorists talking about, what were we actually doing historically, and if you don't have that analysis, that scientific socialism, you're going to fall into that national socialism. People talking about, instead of seeing themselves as part of a larger African diaspora, people are just like, I'm a Black American, and that's as far as it goes. So to really counteract narrow nationalism, it's really important to focus on like how do we go about this. And the great thing is, again, we wrote books. We wrote this book. There's a whole library over there. Like you can study this stuff. Like I'm in a read group right now with a group of my friends. We're going back through Blood Mile. That book is still like you can first chapter. What he is saying in that book pertinent to today. You'd be surprised how much stuff really has not changed structurally. We are still in a colonial situation. We're still dealing with colonial violence. What's happening to Black people, Indigenous people, these genocides we don't categorize as such, like still ongoing. And so basically, to summarize like all these things, I have a quote from Mao: "The people and the people alone are the motive force in the making of world history." And that's the way that we have to see ourselves, like, going about these political struggles. We have our own lives to live. We have our own past to define us. But if we're going to actually make this possible, we have to take true to the fact that we're not alone in this, both historically, in this present moment, and how we move into the future. So that's all I have time to say. Let's get to the end.
Thank you, Daniel. The people